You're stepping into the fast lane on the VTRN Sports app, 93.3 FM and 1320 AM Lynchburg, or by asking Alexa or Google Home, open VTRN Sports Lynchburg. Now, take the fast lane through the topics that matter across the Commonwealth. This is the Fast Lane with Ed Lane.
Not a fan of lose-lose situations when we talk high school sports, but the reality is that we are in a lose-lose situation in a couple of different examples. We'll get to the Logan Thomas VHSL situation tomorrow in the Fast Lane, maybe with a TroStlaw.com fast take on that. Just gathering more information, taking my time to put one out there. A lot of people have already done that. It's unfortunate on a couple of different angles. The way it's been handled by the VHSL, frankly, it seemed like it was kind of sloppy as far as communication of what needed to be done to make sure that the kids were eligible to play this year, how it's been handled afterwards. I get it, if you only have a limited number of high school football games, but it doesn't mean there may not be some consequences coming for the Brookville Bees going forward. And I think all of those are multiple truths that can exist. But again, I don't blame the Thomas family for the stance that they've taken of just wanting their kids to have a chance to play, particularly seniors, and knowing there's just not that many games that are left on the schedule. And then the fact that, if you play them, you may have those games forfeited. But the flip side is, if you don't play them, you may not win the game anyway. So what difference does it really make if you're Brookville? And it's just it's a sucky situation on so many different levels. And then the fact, that there's another one that's popped up, and that is Rustburg against Jefferson Forest, a game that was slated to be our 8th edition of Jefferson Forest Cavaliers football presented by TroStlaw.com. That game will not take place this coming Friday. I have not heard yet. Maybe a ruling has been determined today, and I just haven't heard it. If you've heard it, Fastlane Ed Lane, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or FastlaneEdLane@gmail.com, or text me if you've got my number. Any of those, just let us know. But you hate it because it might cost Jefferson Forest points. More importantly, from a Jefferson Forest standpoint, you can't stand it because your players miss one opportunity to go out on the field. And, football, you're guaranteed 10 regular season games, 9 if you're LCA and you really struggle to field a schedule because teams just don't want to play you. But you're guaranteed 10 games. Now, granted, schools like LCA and recently Jefferson Forest and typically under Brad Bradley Heritage, your top 3 schools in the Seminole District, they're probably going to play more than 9 to 10 games from the regular season because routinely they are making runs into and often deep into their classifications of the state playoffs, a maximum of 5 playoff games that you can play from a school. So, yeah, you get some back, but even if you get 15, it's just not as many. Missing a game in high school basketball just hits differently, or in really any other sport, comparatively speaking. The volume of chances that you get to compete with your players. There's just something special about Friday night lights and Friday night football, and the scarcity of it, like we have seen just on a raw level with football at the college and professional level. The lack of supply creates an inherent and never to be fully fulfilled demand for product on those particular sports. Seasons just can't last longer, whether you just like high school, just like college, just like the pro, or you like some blend of it. So you hate it from that standpoint. And yeah, I think it's reasonable to say you hate it for Rustburg. To be in a situation where you feel like you have to take your kids entirely off the field for a game this Friday against Jefferson Forest, I think it's reasonable to feel for Rustburg in this spot. Because, again, we're talking negative or lose. I think this is more of a triple loss. It's a Rustburg loss because the few players they have that are still healthy miss an opportunity to play a high school football game. And yes, we can joke around about the fact that Lane's Lines, the mythical spot where we set high school lines, had Jefferson Forest as a pretty hefty first half favored and a slightly larger full game favorite. And part of the reason for that, if you're wondering, it was 35.5 in the first half in our hypothetical lines. JF would get up by 5 touchdowns and just make sure they kept that margin at 5 touchdowns. And then in the second half, they might score on a drive with their backups. But inevitably, once the second half comes, there are certain schools out there And forgive me if it's Oscar Smith or it's Phoebus. You might know which one it is, TJ. It's one of the schools in the 757 where they would routinely play these playoff games and win playoff or regular season games like 95-0. I mean, okay, I understand there are people out there with this line of thinking. I think it's ridiculous and I think it's absurd, but there are people out there whose argument is, well, how are you going to tell the kids to not play hard? You don't. You don't have to tell the kids to not play hard. But there's some game theory that you can absolutely institute to make sure that a game that's a blowout in the second half of the running clock just gets over faster. LCA was the first team I saw that was an example of this. Back when Jefferson Forest, in the pre-JT Cruz era, and even at the very beginning, LCA would get up by 35 points in the second half, and immediately the switch flipped. And you can give the thumbs up or thumbs down, TJ, because you're sick, and we want our listeners to check out VTR in Sports and Fastlane Ed Lane on Facebook Live and YouTube. But the games I saw routinely, when LCA, once they got up to a margin where there was a running clock, it's 35 points or more in the second half, the whole game theory shifted. They knew they were not going to lose the game. They knew they were in control of the game, and they knew they had an insurmountable lead. And they got a great coaching staff. You weren't going to come back on them. And they were more talented than you, so you probably weren't coming back on them. And if you're down by 35 at halftime, there's a good chance you're not the same level on any of those areas. But they showed a downshift. You bleed the play clock down to 1. A lot of venues have it. If others don't, it's not hard. Just count 40 seconds every time somebody is tackled, and you can get kind of a rough estimate of it. But you bleed the play clock and game clock as low as you want in a blowout scenario. JF's been in that spot. Frankly, Jefferson Forest has been in that as well. I don't want to get into every conversation I've had with Jefferson Forest coaches, players, and people in that department. But the one that I've had, and was with JT Cruz, their head football coach. Jefferson Forest last week was playing EC class. They missed the extra point. I don't know why they keep screwing around with this. Should we go for 2 or should we kick an extra point early in games? It worked early in the year. It's not, but far be it from me to criticize everything because they're a 6-1 football team. I guess we'll call them 7-1 if you count this win against Rustburg as a forfeit. But Jefferson Forest had a really good year, and they have stacked really good years. So their coaching staff clearly knows what they're doing. But anyway, Jefferson Forest lines up and can't decide 2 or 1. They scramble. They decide to kick the extra point, kind of a hurried operation, and it's partially deflected, and it does not go through. So they get more touchdowns, and they get to 33-0. And you could kick an extra point to make it 34-0. Or do what Jefferson Forest did. It's 2.5 to go in the first half, and you're thinking, hey, if we get it to 35-0, we can get this game into the second half, and as soon as that second half begins, we've got a running clock. And Jefferson Forest's strategy was not to go for 2 to make it 33-0 to 35-0 to run it up on EC glass. It was to get it to 35-0 in the game this past Friday on JF Cavalier Football, presented by TrostLaw.com on 100.9 FM and the Virginia's Talk Station app. The Jefferson Forest strategy was get it to 35 so we can get it to the second half and we can get this game over with as soon as possible. So I can understand that angle as well. Rustburg, there are certain teams they were playing. Let's just take a couple of those teams from the 757. If Rustburg's playing one of them, they might have been beat 95-0 by those teams that just either don't care to or have no desire to understand situational awareness. But if you're playing LCA or you're playing Jefferson Forest, it's real easy. You start putting the backups in. I know JF's starting quarterback plays. I've seen this now 3 or 4 times this year. He does not throw the football when they're up 35-0 in the second half. He's there to basically orchestrate the offense and hand off because their backup quarterback is one of their top skill position players in Xander Coleman. And Jefferson Forest literally just bleeds the entire clock in the second half. You know they're going to win, but I'd rather that happen than just scoring at will mercilessly when nothing happens. And frankly, let's also keep it real in the fast lane. Liberty has won a couple of football games this year. Our own TJ Wilkerson saw them against Brookville this past Friday night in broadcasting games for what we'll call a competing media entity in the Lynchburg area. But Brookville and so many other teams in the area have played Liberty recently. And Liberty this year, they're a respectable team that fights their way through games. They had an early lead in the first quarter, really I think into the second quarter against Brookville. Now, Brookville flipped the switch. Thomas brothers were playing, more on that later, and Brookville blew them out. But Liberty's now at the point where they're forcing other teams to then be locked in and keep their foot on the accelerator because you know Liberty can fight. But Liberty's in a spot where for years, last couple in particular, they were not in that spot. They were the running clock team of choice, the way Rustburg is this year. And most teams in the Seminole District, even the ones that people have vilified, Glass with Jeff Woody, Heritage with Brad Bradley, I've seen those coaches coach for a long period of time as well, and among others. Most of them have gotten to the point where they realize, look, if we've got our starters in, we're going to do what we have to, and there's no running clock in the first half. But as soon as the second half gets here, they just rather get out of the game. So that's largely what you're up against. So I'm going to give Rustburg the benefit of the doubt. If Rustburg doesn't even believe they can field a team that gets them to that point, sympathy should go to them. And really where I also look at this from a high school sports fan, this is the most disconcerting, is when injuries start to mount for schools that don't have a high volume of players, what does it mean going forward? Because you've got some 3A schools in the Seminole District who are legitimately competitive deep into the 3A playoffs. Heritage and LCA stick out. Rustburg actually historically has been. I think this year is probably more of an anomaly. I don't know what will happen with head coach Trey Ross, but give them a full offseason, they could really make some strides. But historically, with Torrance, with Sharness, with Jack Baker, they've had programs that have been more than competitive in this spot and situation. But Liberty for a long time was not. And you're really fighting an uphill battle. And they're probably better served. I know the VHSL won't strong arm this, but they'll strong arm the Thomas situation. Maybe they should pick a better fight. But they won't force those smaller schools to play in the Dogwood District where they're playing schools that are fielding football rosters that are more comparable in size, even if some of them are 1A, others are 2, and others are 3A. There's similar sizes at 1, 2, and 3A than there are 2A, 3A, and 4A. Because we've seen it with 4A, Amherst, Glass, and JF, and even the bigger rosters, the Heritage and LCA. It's really hard to compete with those type of rosters versus similar size. And that can make a world of difference. But I just hope we don't get to a point where later in the season, smaller schools that are competing against bigger schools can't even play the game because they don't have the volume of bodies to compete with schools that have regular 2-deep depth charts, starters and regular backups. And they'd be better served playing in the Dogwood District where schools often have players who go both ways. I'll use Gretna as an example. They are maybe the class of the Dogwood District, but JF beat them 43-0. Again, another running clock game where JF was up comfortably in the second half and really just bled the clock in the second half. When Gretna's going against schools of a similar size, all of a sudden, the games are competitive, they're entertaining, the players see that there's a chance, and other similar schools that have some good athletes here and there, but just don't flat have the volume of players. It makes a world of a difference. And Nelson County's an example of this. If Nelson was in the Seminole, it would be brutal. But the last couple of years, they've been a team that routinely wins 3 to 6 games, somewhere in that ballpark. They're probably not competing with Alta Vista, Gretna, Appomattox, and those programs good years. But they're a team that can still win some games here and there and in non-district play, and they're at least able to make it relatively competitive because they're playing schools of a similar size. And I could do a whole rant on this. Maybe I've already done partially, but maybe the VHSL should shift some of their focus off of the Logan Thomas family case and situation and shift it into making sure some of these districts actually have a level of reasonable structure so these teams have a chance to play going forward. I don't care if the Dogwood doesn't want Liberty Bedford. It makes more sense. Screw what the Dogwood wants and their presidents. I get it. The VHSL needs to strong arm and say, we're the VHSL. This is what it's going to be. If you want to really fight the battle and show how big and bad you are at the VHSL, fight that battle. Look at other schools. Consider, I'm not saying Rustburg's body of work this year seems more like an anomaly. But if the trend continues, maybe it's worth revisiting that as well, because in other sports, it's different. But in football, it's just a raw numbers game. And if you don't have the raw number of players to keep up, when you're going against programs, and the Seminoles an example of this, but certainly a lot of bigger 3A and definitely 4, 5, and 6A schools, those programs are going to have big rosters, too deep, and it's just going to be a mismatch, and nobody wins. The teams that are fielding smaller rosters don't get the best competitive games. The other players are missing out on games being played, and we're left with this situation where you just hate the cancellation that robs Rustburg of a chance to play, but also Jefferson Forest as well. Meanwhile, when we come back in the fast lane, we'll get to Amy Trask, but before we do that, we will punt our discussion on the JMU Dukes to a different date and time. But if somebody has punted you on the road, whether it's a forcible punt or even maybe just tapping your fender, but it's created a situation that you didn't envision and maybe it's worse than you expected, that's where an attorney might be of assistance to you. And having 4+ decades of service at trostlaw.com, could certainly help.
Not one, not two, not three, not four.
Nope, not four. More than 4 decades at Trost Law. They're there to help. They'll deploy their resources. They have team members that have been in this for a long time, including some like Dustin, that you've heard regularly now on the VTR and Sports app and our other Virginia Talk Radio Network platforms. He used to work for the insurance companies. So he knows the tricks that they might try to pull at these gargantuan enterprises and knows how to protect you if the situation gets out of hand. That's what you need. That's what you'll get at trostlaw.com. Now, we'll punt our JMU discussion and getting into the weeds on the Dukes tomorrow in the fast lane, but other topics right now in...
It's time for Fast Five at 5-ish. 5-ish minutes on 5 relevant topics done around 5 p.m.-ish. Ish, because our counting skills are kinda ish. Let's start with number 5.
Avery Mills, Emmy Stout. They are part of 2 Liberty Flames that were preseason honorees on all conference watch lists. You know, when you start getting to like 10 players on the watch list, like Conference USA does for men's and women's basketball, I don't call it all Conference USA team. I call it all Conference USA watch list. An all conference team in basketball, that's 5 players. Or as LeBron reminds us,
Not one, not two, not three, not four.
but 5 players. We could have continued the LeBron and just gone with the not 6 and not 7 because it's not. But Avery Mills and Emmy Stout are part of that for Liberty. There's enough that's in place there. And the coaching transition keeps a level of continuity that all of this makes sense. But downshifting them beyond Louisiana Tech, who is now the first place favored, both Liberty and La Tech got 5 first place votes, but the Lady Techsters 3 more overall points. I'm fine with that. I actually would give Louisiana Tech a little bit more of an edge just with returning coaching and returning production. I know Liberty's got more star players returning, but that type of coaching transition, as calculated as it was for Liberty, makes a lot of sense. And I would not discount Middle Tennessee as well, who's in 3rd place, but 125, 128, 125, and 123 for La Tech, Liberty, and Middle Tennessee in terms of total votes, 5, 5, and 2 as far as first place votes for the preseason poll. It's tight at the top, but honestly, I'd probably have Liberty 2nd and maybe even 3rd beyond La Tech and Middle Tennessee just because of returning players. I see a path for the Lady Flames, but I am more cautious just whenever you have these coaching transitions this close to the start of the season. Meanwhile, Liberty men's basketball preseason watch list, 10 players, and in no particular order, 3 Liberty Flames made that. Zach Cleveland, Kata Matheny, and Colin Porter. I'm not surprised at all by that. I'll actually go with the biggest surprise I have, which is player of the year for men's basketball, preseason favored, is Simeon Cottle of Kennesaw State. I'm surprised, not that he was preseason player of the year, but I'm surprised that he wasn't poached off of Kennesaw State's roster to go somewhere else. Maybe there's background stuff about him. I don't know. To get my usher on here in the fast lane, I don't pretend to know all the details of Simeon Cottle and his background. I just remember seeing him shock Liberty in a late home game at our spot last year. And Kennesaw State gave Liberty what I think was actually a blessing in disguise, but a late season reality check loss. Now, Kennesaw, 1 of the 12 first place votes. Liberty got the other 11. They're 17 points behind the Flames, but they are picked 2nd in Conference USA. I would say that's reasonable. I would probably think, honestly, that number should probably be a little bit tighter. I think Liberty should be the favored and Kennesaw is the 2nd favored. I don't pretend to have seen the betting odds, again, to get my usher on, for what Kennesaw's preseason prognostication is to win the conference. But I think it's worth at least sprinkling something and considering that. And again, I need to do a little reporting on that and come back on that. But I can see a path where that's the case. I think Liberty's a deeper, more talented team. I trust Richie McKay to integrate transfers. It may not be the way it was last year. Hard to replicate Taylor Peters' production. But I do see that for Liberty. But when you have someone of Simeon Cottle's talent, it's reasonable to believe that Liberty can at least do something with that, and he can at least force that type of challenge. Meanwhile, in
Number 3,
executives at the NCAA are inching ever closer to an agreement to expand the NCAA tournament from 68 to 76 teams with what would now be a 12-game opening round played at 2 sites and would start not this upcoming season, but next season, 2026 and 2027. That is essentially how it would work. I'm not going to say I'm going to die on this hill because I don't quite believe it's one I'll die on, but I do like the idea of fewer schools. And yes, my bigger challenge is, of course, the most reality one, which is, here's the thing. My biggest challenge is if I have faith that Cinderellas and smaller conferences would be as proportionally represented as bigger conference, by adding 8 additional teams to the NCAA men's basketball tournament, I'd be for it. But my bigger issue is I tend to think that your Big 6, Big East, ACC, SEC, Big 10, Big 12, and even the A10, I think they're going to gobble up the majority, if not all of those bids. So it's not going to be evenly distributed, even if we have to get more of these, 16 and 13 Big 10 teams that really aren't that good, but because they strong arm, they get them into the playoff. I am leery of that. Meanwhile,
Number 2.
Tennessee baseball coach Tony Vitello has been finalizing a deal to become the new San Francisco Giants manager. I am curious what Trey Lyle has to say on the morning warm-up because he's more the baseball guy. I'm fascinated by this because we've seen the difficult transition from college to the pros or pros to college in basketball and football. I don't know enough about baseball's X's and O's to know whether that's an easier or a harder challenge, especially given that analytics are much more prevalent in the pros than they are in the gut instinct era of high school. But I'm fascinated by this and I'm more than anything curious to see how it unfolds.
Number 1.
Jaden Daniels officially ruled out for Monday Night Football game at the Kansas City Chiefs that you can hear this coming Monday, 7:30 airtime right here on the BTR and Sports app in the greater Lynchburg area. Long-term health has got to be the priority for Daniels, even if you're the Commanders. And you honestly, let's call a spade a spade. They probably were going to lose this game to Kansas City anyway. If their defense is struggling to contain the Dallas Cowboys, what's going to happen when Mahomes and Reed see that film and start licking their chops? You needed Daniels to have a better chance to keep up. Washington's going to need almost a miraculous performance in this particular game. You don't know how the wild card round is going to play out, but you guys still have to think long-term with Jaden Daniels. Meanwhile, when we return to the Fast Lane, we will discuss the Washington Commanders, including some ridiculous Jaden Daniels comparisons with Amy Trask, former Raiders CEO and current CBS Sports analyst. She will also give her insight into the Cal Golden Bears, who play at Virginia Tech. 5:30 airtime, so it means a shorter Friday with TJ Wilkerson. He might be thankful for it since he's sick. But a shorter show Friday because of Virginia Tech hosting Cal. Their superfan, Amy Trask, joins us next here in the Fast Lane.
It's so worth the drive to big savings at the Used Car Superstore on the Sheeler Motor Mile. Shop local and save more with exceptional service and selection. Your search stops here with over 900 pre-owned vehicles to choose from, plus a huge selection of new car brands in Southwest Virginia. Honda, Hyundai, Toyota, Subaru, Kia, Chevrolet, Mitsubishi, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram. 11 new car brands, 900 used vehicles, all in one location. The Sheeler Motor Mile gives you more choices with pre-owned cars, trucks, vans, and SUVs. Many have miles in the teens, remaining factory warranties, and some are even local one-owner vehicles. More than any other dealer in the area, plus exceptional service, selection, savings, and financing options, and top dollar for your trade. Volume selling means volume pricing, and we've got the volume with 11 new car brands and over 900 used vehicles, all in one location. And we're proud to support our local schools and community. The Used Car Superstore on the Sheeler Motor Mile, your premier car dealer, locally and family-owned for over 50 years. I-81 exit 118C in Christiansburg. Call 866-SHEELER1. Always open at Sheeler.com.
Good to great. It's one of the hardest transitions to make. 801 Raw Bar has pulled it off. Their country boil bags have taken the good seafood and flavors from the Bayou region and brought them to the Hill City for a great seafood dish. You can also build your own seafood plates at 801 Raw Bar, featuring fresh shrimp, crabs, scallops, and fish from the Atlantic region. Step back into the relaxing beach house vibe with different regional seafood twists at 801 Raw Bar on Church Street in downtown Lynchburg.
Do you want to experience the benefit of radio and digital advertising for your business, but have no or limited funds to advertise? Let us tell you about InsaneRadioDeals.com. No cash needed. We will advertise your business on our 8 over-the-air AM and FM stations and our digital platforms that distribute out news talk, sports, and classic hits in exchange for gift cards, tickets, or experiences that will be used for your business. This allows you to advertise across the entire Virginia Talk Radio network without any cash needed and to generate a large amount of new business. Last year, we started over 900,000 streams on our online platforms, so VTRN and InsaneRadioDeals.com is the place where your business gets heard. Want to learn more? Call Melinda 434-534-8500 or email info@VirginiaTalkRadioNetwork.com.
VTRN Sports, powered by ESPN Radio. The games play here. NFL action this week kicks off on Thursday with Vikings at Chargers at 8 o'clock after Tech Talk Live. Then Sunday, a tripleheader. Bills at Panthers, Cowboys at Broncos, and Packers at Steelers. Coverage on the day starts at 12:30. Then on Monday, coverage starts at 7 p.m. for Commanders at Chiefs on Monday Night Football. Catch the big games on VTRN Sports, 93.3 FM, 1320 AM, and on the VTRN Sports app and ask your smart speaker open VTRN Sports.
It's been said that 50% of advertising is wasted, but it's hard to gauge what 50% that is, except for businesses using InsaneRadioDeals.com. They've been putting their gift cards and gift certificates into the marketplace, which are then a direct tracking mechanism to figure out just how effective advertising is. Plus, they've gotten additional ads to run across the Virginia Talk Radio Network. To put InsaneRadioDeals.com to work for you, email ed@wiqoradio.com and visit InsaneRadioDeals.com.
Hi, this is Bill Roth, voice of Virginia Tech football. It's time to start jumping. This is your home for the Hokies, VTRN Sports 93.3 FM and the VTRN Sports app.
Step into the Fast Lane 24/7 at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, back to the Fast Lane.
So many ways we can go, so little time. I'm channeling my inner Carlton Banks here in the Fast Lane. Yes, that is a reference to the great show Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Yes, we are going out to California, but the opposite end of that state to chat with a friend of ours in the Fast Lane who is always reminding us that we don't want to go slow in the Fast Lane. We want to enjoy as many ice cream flavors as possible, and we all should adopt our pets. Former CEO of the Raiders, now current analyst for CBS Sports, and yes, some of the chagrin of many in our area, Cal Golden Bears superfan Amy Trask with us in the Fast Lane. Amy, did we cover it all, and did we cover it all correctly?
Well, I wasn't going to mention it, but since you asked if you covered it all correctly, I will share just one correction. You were in the right half of the state. Now, I'm not in Bel Air, but I am in Southern California. Other than that, absolutely perfect.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I hope you're enjoying great weather out there and enjoying everything that is to transpire. Virginia Tech fans want you to not enjoy what will happen on Friday night. 5:30 airtime, VTRN Sports app, 7:30 kickoff, Cal at Virginia Tech. We see you proudly donning your Cal Golden Bears gear and apparel. Year one of the Justin Wilcox, Ron Rivera partnership. It started off looking great. It has hit some, pun intended here in the Fast Lane, speed bumps. Are they speed bumps or is it more like potholes in the road?
Well, before we dive into the analysis of Cal VTech, I will note a few things. One, because those of us who went to Berkeley are always considered by many, many, many people to be hippies. And by the way, if I'm a hippie that focuses on EBITDA, return on investment, comprehensive annual growth rate. So yeah, okay, I'll be a hippie. But because of that, I have set myself up for you in front of a peace sign. So to everybody at VTech, peace. Look, we can all root for our teams, and very nicely done. I'm, of course, grabbing something and holding on to it because of how precariously everything here is set up. Otherwise, I'd give you a peace sign back. And as to peace, we can all root for our teams, and we can do so in the spirit of sportsmanship and as good sports. So here's to a great game. And oh, by the way, VTech fans, do you know that the president of Virginia Tech has a bachelor's degree from Cal Berkeley, a master's degree from Cal Berkeley, and oh yeah, his doctoral degree is from Cal Berkeley. So, okay, go Bears.
Oh, wow. You're just rubbing salt into the wound of Virginia Tech fans
With
right
love.
now.
With love.
Oh, we know it's with love and peace, of course. And we use the peace sign in the Fast Lane because we don't want other pieces to be going there, whether it's figurative or literal, as Amy Trask is with us in the Fast Lane and totally just put Virginia Tech fans in their academic place relative to the Cal Golden Bears. There are many angles that we can take when actually looking at the matchup, looking at what has now become a budding rivalry in the ACC, one of them being the Rivera-Wilcox partnership. Was there as much tension? Is there as much tension as people made it out to be at the beginning of the season and perhaps even at the midway point?
Well, as you know, tension waxes and wanes depending on circumstances. And certainly there was something there. Cal is doing far better than many anticipated. I know that Ron Rivera's expectations and goals are tremendously high, and we'll see how this season goes. You know, I say this with respect to NFL teams all the time. I'll add it with respect to college teams. If you're going to make a change at coach, and I'm not suggesting that one may or may not be warranted, you have to first ask, and do what? Do you have an answer that is better than, or at least as good as the status quo? So that's something that will need to be considered. But can I, let me just make a point here while we're referencing, you just referenced the ACC. Listen to me, ACC. I have been saying this since Cal and Stanford joined the ACC. I've shared it on CBS Sports and otherwise. I think you need to change ACC to All Coast Conference. Because, we have a coast out here too. We're on the Pacific Coast. So how about All Coast Conference or Across the Country Conference? But you ain't just the Atlantic Coast Conference anymore.
Well, we trumpeted that when this move was made, Amy, and we really trumpeted it when SMU was added, because it's not just the Pacific and the Atlantic Coast, it's Gulf Coast too. They're repping all three of them.
All Coast Conference, baby. And by the way, I should have copyrighted that when I initially thought of it when Cal and Stanford joined, but I didn't, so you can use it, ACC.
We need, we have personal injury lawyers like our friends at trostlaw.com who are partners in the Fast Lane, but we really need a copyright attorney to message us at fastlaneedlane@gmail.com or Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, so that we can get on that and, yes, loop Amy Trask into some of the royalty fees for this particular name. We'll split it whatever it's worth, and just pray that the conference sticks together in a multi-coast form over a handful of years. Speaking of, there was tension believed to be there with Wilcox and Rivera at Cal. There is also Virginia Tech situation where there's enough that the athletic director and the head coach, one's already gone. The other is kind of in a tenuous spot as they have a multifaceted approach to replace the departing coach. Are those the most dysfunctional? Is North Carolina, who was just at Cal last week, the most dysfunctional? You obviously have a front row seat to Carolina having been at Cal. I mean, is the ACC learning what you can credibly say as the former Raider CEO, Amy, what not to do in leadership?
Well, I would certainly say we don't want to have a sort of most discombobulated race. We don't want to have a race to see which team is in more trouble in terms of internal conflict and turmoil and all such things. But as to the ACC, again, the All Coast Conference, wouldn't you have to say right now the team with sort of the most discombobulation, and by the way, I don't even know if that's a word, would be UNC? There's a lot going on there right now. But as to, and by the way, I had a tremendous relationship with Bill Belichick during our combined years or our overlapping years in the league, and I wish him no ill will, but it was a fumble. I have to always add that footnote. But there are issues there, and there's issues at a lot of schools. And of course, everything going on with respect to NIL and conference changing and potentially more changes in conference is adding to the stress and the pressure at universities. And the thing that I hope is that everybody recognizes that notwithstanding all of these issues, the players on the field are young men. They're playing football as part of their college years. And if there's going to be anger directed at or animosity directed at any of the schools, leave the players out of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very reasonable thing. I know they're getting paid now, but I don't care what level. I am not a fan of hate mail and hate speech and all of that. We advocate where Amy Trask does with the sign that she has behind us. We use the peace sign, but we advocate for a peaceful approach.
Well, and you did mention, of course, that the players are being paid, and they are. But remember their age. And I would like the first person listening to this who didn't do something at the age of 18 or 19 or 20 or even thereafter, that they now look back at and think, ooh, that might not have been really smart. They are kids.
Yes, they are. They're, again, to get my usher on for a moment in the fast lane, I must confess I did not always make the best decisions. You mentioned your ties, though, to Bill Belichick. Obviously, I don't know if y'all overlapped when you were with the Raiders and Lombardi was out there or not, but he's part of that situation as well in Chapel Hill. Is it their personality and attitude? Is it the expectations that they set at the beginning of their tenure in Chapel Hill that's created as much of a mess as anything? Or is it the fact that, when you're winning, you can get away with being a little bit more abrasive, shall we be nice and say that? But when things aren't going well, it really often blows up in your face.
Well, you're right in so many regards. A lot of people say winning cures everything. I have always said, no, it doesn't cure things, but winning is a wonderful deodorant. So if there are problems and a team is winning, that deodorant abates some of the problems. It's not a cure, it's a deodorant. As to your question about Bill Belichick, Al Davis, over the course of my career, which was almost 30 years, involved me in one coaching search, just one. And it was the year that we interviewed Bill Belichick. He had me meet with every coach, which I did. And then he asked me, who would you hire? And I said, Bill Belichick. Well, he went in a different direction, also made a good choice. But years later, when Bill started winning and winning and winning and winning, Al said something to me that really touched my heart. He said, kid, you know how to pick a coach. So that was my interaction with Bill. The first time was interviewing him for our opening at head coach.
Wow. Well, you've got the eye for talent. We have the eye for analysis. That's why you're on CBS Sports and help contribute to that. And we're thankful you contribute as well here in the Fast Lane as Amy Trask is with us. She does negotiate like a girl. That's what the title of her book is. We mean that in a very complimentary way in so many ways, Amy. A couple of notes to wrap up our chat today. One of them being on a local angle. The Washington Commanders are not going to play Jayden Daniels this week. I know this may be the most simplistic answer, but is this the right decision, even though it's not a long-term injury, knowing that, whether you win or not against Kansas City, and the Commanders seem to have more holes than anticipated, that's one that they seem to have a good grasp on at quarterback, and you can't risk that with a short-term prognosis.
Well, that's terrific analysis. And I think when you're making that decision, it involves two sorts of analysis: cost benefit. The benefit of playing him is perhaps you win that game, which you might not. And maybe you will, but I think going in, you think, well, if we start him, we have a better chance to win. That's the prospective benefit. But the prospective cost is he exacerbates the injury and you lose him for longer. So that's your cost benefit analysis. And it's a risk reward analysis. Again, the reward, perhaps you win a game you might otherwise not. The risk is to Jayden Daniels. You drafted him last year with the number 2 pick in the draft. Your team is sitting at 3-4 right now. You're going in to play a team, which, by the way, Kansas City was the roughest location, I thought, in which we played during my years in the league, in terms of just the tremendous, tremendous fans there. They're cacophonous. They create an advantage for their team. The Washington Commanders and the Kansas City Chiefs are not in the same conference, as you know. So if you sit him, and you don't risk him, and perhaps you have a longer-term benefit by sitting him.
The one we'll wrap up on is similar with Jayden Daniels, but there's some people, I don't know whether they're trying to manifest this or there's, scar tissue in Washington from, shall we say, prior ownership. We try to get our legalese on here so we don't mention specific names, but people can kind of read between the lines. Even if, you're my 7-year-old twin, you can figure these ones out. Prior leadership, the leadership, that's the wrong word to use.
Correct.
Prior people in charge in Washington. Is that the scar tissue of why people see the Jayden Daniels injury and go, oh no, we're going to have a repeat of RG3 situation?
That's a great question. And, people may flash back to RG3, but as you noted, different ownership, different leadership. And as you aptly noted, let me revert to my legal education. And when you said leadership earlier, my immediate thought was, objection, Your Honor, assumes a fact not in evidence, that there was leadership with the prior group. But look, people may flash back to that, but it is an entirely different organization right now. And while you don't want to name names, I thus won't name names, but I will note that under prior ownership, boy, do I have some stories to share with you at some point.
We might have to get you on to get those Snyder-type comments from Amy Trask, who has been generous enough to join us in the Fast Lane. Amy, thank you for your time in the Fast Lane. The only thing that would have made this even more exciting is if you were eating a cup of ice cream with sprinkles on it and sharing some of it with multiple furry friends that are in your Southern California location.
Next time I will, and I will promise you that if you are so gracious and generous to again have me on, I won't necessarily wear my Cal shirt. I might, maybe not. I won't be in front of the peace sign. I did that just for all the people at VTech who think we're all hippies at Berkeley. And I won't be so precariously situated that I'm terrified I'm going to tip over.
Well, the funny thing is that we got you on next week when Virginia gets ready to play Cal. They'd be right at home with you guys. So it might be a 2 peas in a pod, if you will.
There you go.
Amy Trask with us. Amy, we love catching up with you. We greatly appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Amy Trask with us to wrap up this portion of the Fast Lane. When we return, we pivot from pro football and a little college to high school football. Bob Alvis of the Sports Buffet podcast. Can't believe it's taken us this long to connect with him in the Fast Lane, but that streak of time will end momentarily here in the Fast Lane. In most things, it's hard to go from ordinary to extraordinary. It's easy with your home or business. Call the Concrete Wizard and transform your place into an extraordinary space. If you're tired of looking at unsightly concrete, then bring light to your old surfaces. Call the Concrete Wizard for free design consultations, free estimates, and fast professional concrete resurfacing. And visit theconcretewizard.com for ideas from other before and after photos.
Hey, small to medium business owners, if you're frustrated with slow IT support, high costs, or paying for services you just don't use, it's time for a change. Hi, I'm Colt with We Fix Stupid Computers. We provide reliable on-site and remote support tailored for businesses just like yours. And we go beyond just fixing problems. We empower your staff with real tech knowledge so they can work smarter every day. From repairs to training to full IT support, we save you time, stress, and money. Call We Fix Stupid Computers, 434-525-8590, where smart support meets real savings.
Going once, going twice, gone. This is the last year you can have Terrell E. Mosley install a new qualifying heat pump and get a $2,000 federal tax credit. If your current system is over 10 years old, you should seriously consider updating your system and take advantage of this tax credit. Not to mention, a new, more energy-efficient system will also save you on your electric bill. Call Terrell E. Mosley. It's a free service for them to come and discuss the options available to you. Don't miss out. Call Terrell E. Mosley or visit them at terrellemosley.com.
Your home is more than just walls and windows. It's where life happens. And at Right Choice Construction, we get that. We're not just builders. We're fathers, mothers, neighbors, just like you. And every nail and every beam reflects our commitment to creating a place you're proud to live in. With Right Choice Construction, you're choosing a team that's been perfecting the art of building for years. So build with us. Build with experience, build with quality, build with Right Choice.
For over a century, AM radio has evolved to meet the needs of our community. More than 80 million listeners depend on AM radio each month. It's also the backbone of the emergency alert system, keeping us safe in dangerous times. A new bill in Congress would ensure this free, reliable service remains in cars. Text AM to 52886 and tell Congress to support the AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act.
Message and data rates may apply. You may receive up to 4 messages a month, and you may text STOP to stop.
This message furnished by the National Association of Broadcasters.
Halloween isn't here yet, but that doesn't mean you have to wait till the day of trick-or-treating to go out and have fun. Because we have scary, fun experiences for you at 62% off at InsaneRadioDeals.com, brought to you by VTRN. That's right, folks. We're doubling the love at 62% off list price items like Star City Half Marathon, Liberty Flames tickets, Rise Up Climbing Day and month passes, and Aqua Trek Adventures. All this and more, now to November 3rd on InsaneRadioDeals.com.
Hey, this is Virginia Tech analyst and former Hokies tight end Mike Burnham. You're listening to The Fast Lane with Ed Lane and Trey Lyle. Join the chat at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram.
I'll reiterate, I don't really like lose-lose or lose-lose-lose situations, but we just have them, and it's the reality of where we are to an extent. And there are positive things that are also transpiring in high school football that we will address as well with Bob Alvis of the Sports Buffet podcast. Bob, first of all, great to have you debut today in the Fast Lane. Second, I have to get my apology on and say I'm sorry that it's taken us this long to connect with you in the Fast Lane. And we're glad to have you on. So thank you for joining us in spite of our egregiously long delay of game penalty.
Always love it. We'll go hang out together Friday night because there's nothing to do, right?
Yeah, exactly. We don't have a game, unfortunately, at least Rustburg and Jefferson Forest being postponed. We started the show off, and I did a TrostLaw.com fast take on this earlier today, of this kind of being the ultimate lose-lose-lose situation. It's a loss for Rustburg because you hate seeing a program in a spot where you don't have enough players that you feel comfortable playing a game this late in the season. You hate it from Jefferson Forest because you don't get so many of these games, and especially for a JF program that historically has tried to not run the score up and rub it in. Once they get to kind of 35 or 42 points in the second half, they basically just let the running clock do its thing in the game. And you hate it if this is going to be a trend late in the season for smaller rosters against bigger rosters where you get more of these late season opt-outs because it means fewer games. Where am I off base? Where am I on to something?
I think you're 100% on. I mean, this is happening in Southwest Virginia because Galax had to forfeit essentially their whole season. JF can become a winner in a way because they can get it declared a no contest to where they're only dividing by 9 in the power points as opposed to 10. But now you have to back up senior nights. You have to back up a lot of things to that season finale against the Heritage Pioneers in November.
And not to mention the fact that, I mean, like, this is not earth-shattering, but Heritage, they are a really good football team and a really good football program under Brad Bradley, even though, no relation, David Bradley suffered that gruesome injury, and the video circulated of him being in the locker room last week, which is really cool to see. But, you add all those distractions on a night where you didn't want to have that many distractions with it being a marquee opponent the way Heritage is, and you're trying to tune up for the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, it happened 4 minutes into the game against Brookfield for Heritage. But, yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, you don't want that last game to be, now more hoopla, so to speak, around it. But now it's got more. And, you lose an opportunity for those seniors to play at home one more time because you only get but so many.
Yeah, I mean, I get it in the sense that people will counter saying that, you've got playoff games and JF, Heritage, and LCA are kind of the 3 programs in the Seminole right now where you're not guaranteed to make the playoffs every year, but at the beginning of the year, if you were to put hypothetical lines on it, they would be prohibitive favorites to at least get to the playoffs and play an extra game. But I mean, you do basketball as well. High school basketball, you've done Dogwood District, you've done Seminole, you're very familiar with that. Losing a game in basketball or any other high school sport, it stinks because you only get so many chances to do these games with your friends, but there's just fewer of them in football, which means when you don't get one, it does have a bigger impact.
True, and I mean, that's another discussion for another time, too, just because with the way everybody does playoff points differently, football, basketball, obviously different, but yeah, you're right. I mean, you only got but so many, and I mean, go even look at college football. I mean, every game counts, so to speak. I could argue the same thing in high school football. Yeah, a November basketball game counts the same thing a February basketball game does, but it's got that different feel. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, it does. I mean, and you're talking about the timelines of the year. You've been there before, and I don't know if it's the same way in your eyes with high school basketball. When I broadcast games, it was. I think it's certainly this way in college basketball. Once the calendar turns to January and you get beyond Christmas, there is a different feel versus every night in the fall from the beginning, or I guess technically the end of August, all the way through the middle of December. Every one of those games has that same level of it really matters intensity.
I always say November basketball doesn't count, but it does count. But I get what you're saying. August football feels weird too. It doesn't feel normal until you hit that after Labor Day thing for football. But, they all count. And with that being said, they're all important enough to win in any sport, no matter what you look at.
Bob Alvis with us here in the Fast Lane from the Sports Buffet podcast. We can get into the whole, conference or district affiliations, and that's an off-season topic that I'm sure we will continue to explore as we get deeper and further, into the summer months when there is not as much high school activity taking place. But Bob, you look at it right now for Rustburg. Is it, are they now the Liberty where Liberty was, in that spot where they really struggled to get numbers and participation, and they got that up at the start of this year. They've won a couple of games. They've been competitive in other contests. Is Rustburg in that spot? Is this more of a one-off season with the late coaching staff change and Trey Ross being put in another tough spot? What is your assessment of where Rustburg and Liberty happen to be right now in the Seminole District hierarchy?
I'll answer it with a cop-out of I don't know, but when you're building up other residences and businesses, and that's a good thing for people because they got to live somewhere. But at the same time, how many people are migrating to Bedford and to Rustburg? Probably not as many that are migrating to Forest. So it does hurt a little bit. I mean, Rustburg has always had that hardworking mentality in terms of the Seminole. Liberty has always, I think, had that hardworking mentality too. But a lot of people, I feel like, don't know what they've got because they're in Bedford sometimes. But I think I don't know. I mean, everybody and their brother will say, why does Liberty not move to the Dogwood? And I know some people I talked to, even in Liberty's camp, they didn't want to move to the Dogwood. They wanted the competition of the Seminole. But at the end of the day, what's it getting you if you're not going to go out there and be competitive? And that's not the kids' fault, because as you well know, this all starts at a much, much lower level. And I'm talking teeny tiny, 8, 9, 10-year-old levels, just because you got to get people interested in the sport of whatever sport it is.
Yeah, I mean, there's youth participation at these levels and a lot of kids just being interested in it. And it's more just being there, developing some muscle memory, wanting to play. And then when you get further along, you get a chance to do that. I know we're biased, but again, FYAA, Forest Youth Athletic Association, they're kind of a feeder program for Jefferson Forest. And if
Alta Vista used to be really, really down until they got the Lynch Station Lizards. Don't get me wrong, Juan Thornhill and everybody like that helps too. But until they developed a rec program, Alta Vista was out of the Dogwood for a while and playing independence, because you've got to think everything with the VHSL in terms of scheduling normally rotates on a 2-year cycle. Do I think anybody would back out of the Seminole and go play independent? I think that is super rare. Nelson did it at the Dogwood level too, but I don't see anybody going that direction. So to answer your question from like 20 minutes ago, yeah, I think this is probably a one-off, or not at least a consistent. Rustburg and Liberty are going to be cellar dwellers.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you bring that point up. And a lot of it is, I mean, Gretna's probably the example that we used earlier, and Bob Alvis of the Sports Buffet podcast covers high school football, basketball, winter sports, spring sports. He does it all at the Sports Buffet podcast. But Bob, Gretna's the example. They look like they were in a different league from Jefferson Forest just because of the volume of players they have on their roster. But when guys are going two-way in the Dogwood, where almost every team's got multiple guys that are playing on offense, defense, and special teams, it's much more even, and you can see where they truly can be relative to their peers.
Everybody is going to say the difference in Dogwood and Seminole schools is speed. And unfortunately, you don't really get to see that speed until you get into the playoffs, which are, coming faster than we know. But it's starting to catch up to where I feel like other people have speed too. You get to the south side, GW Danville's got speed. JF might see them at some point. The Valley is known more for being a tough district. The Southwest Virginia schools are known for being, those 275-pound linemen tough. So it just depends on what area of the state. And of course, the 757's got everything and then some. But, I feel like everybody in Central Virginia's got that level of speed labeled on them. So when JF plays Gretna, you're going to see super speed maybe, or a lot more kids that have speed as opposed to speed, but there's not main numbers on that other side.
Meanwhile, the opposite of speed is this, Logan Thomas family versus the VHSL situation that is unfolded. I know this is anti-sports media, teachings, but I'll just give you a blank slate on this. What is your take on how this situation has transpired?
Not being involved in the trenches on it, I think a lot of people could have handled it probably better than what they have. I feel like a lot of it is more of a he said, she said. And, unless you're he or unless you're she, you don't really know what's being said, because a lot of it is cloudy. Brookville obviously says the VHSL doesn't. How is eligibility dealt with? I mean, my big question is, these kids did not play, 3 weeks ago or whatnot when they played Amherst and when they played Heritage, but now they played. I think there's a lot of questions out there that a lot of people don't understand. Bryson Gordon has done a great job reporting it for the News in Advance. Other media outlets have picked up on it too, but it's a situation to where a lot of it is he said, she said, and until he and she say what they said, a lot of us are just kind of wondering, and we look at black and white, not gray.
Bryson Gordon was with our friend Trey Lyle and Ty Tracy on the morning warm-up, 7 to 8 a.m. on the VTR and Sports app, the morning warm-up, wherever you listen to podcasts. To go back and check out that interview from today, I got to get my usher on for a moment. It was taking place while I had the kids in the dropout line at school, and I was going to listen to the podcast, and then I had a meeting run long today, so it hasn't happened. So I've got to be honest with it. The way we'll wrap it up on this, though, Bob, and yes, we look forward to more of these, and we can actually talk gridiron X's and O's action that's taking place right now in the Dogwood and the Seminole districts, and then other sports as these seasons end up progressing. But the Logan Thomas situation, my bigger take has been, you're right. This could have been handled a lot cleanly on so many other levels, but we also might be a little naive to not think that reclassification to certain zones where you want to play has been transpiring in different forms in different locations forever, I'll use Martinsville, where I was from, as an analogy. If you wanted to play basketball in Martinsville, Henry County, you magically lived with the aunt and uncle who was in the city. If you wanted to play football, you lived in the county, so you could go to Bassett or Magna Vista or one of the other schools, and that's just how it worked. And this has been going back decades, so that's where I can understand even more so the Brookville fans who are upset going, really? This is where you choose to come down?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, it's happened ever since we were boys and the boys before us were boys. So yeah, I mean, it's weird that this is all of a sudden coming out. But how does this end well? I think is the ultimate question too, because I don't think it ends well for any parties involved. To where I don't want to say a smear, but somebody's going to look bad at the end of the day.
Bob Alvis, he's at the Sports Buffet on Twitter, and he's got the Sports Buffet podcast. And generous enough to make a debut with us in the Fast Lane in spite of us taking so long to connect with him. Bob, we are glad to have you in the Fast Lane, and we look forward to many more of these.
I appreciate it. No ill will from me at all.
Wonderful. It warms the heart to know that Bob Alvis does not hold resentment and negativity to us. He's got the love gesture that he just flashed for those watching at Fast Lane Ed Lane and VTRN Sports on Facebook Live and YouTube. We'll bring it back to you, Bob. It's all love from our end as well.
Ed, I appreciate you, man.
Bob Alvis with us here in the Fast Lane, and a fun way to wrap up our chat with him today. And we'll do a TroySlaw.com fast take in the next day or so on this. You just hate it on so many different levels. The way the Thomas situation has unfolded at Brookville. We'll get to it now because you're wrapping up the regular season for a lot of teams. But you just get so many of these games, and I go back to mine. I think the Thomases, the Brookville administrators, and the VHS could have all handled this better. But I also am not naive enough to not think that we haven't seen these type of transfers to different locations depending on for whom you want to play and based on your situation. So that is a reality as well. It's also a reality that we're done in the Fast Lane. Chime in. Fast Lane, Ed Lane, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, wherever you listen to podcasts, including Facebook Live and YouTube. If you missed anything, we're back tomorrow at 5. Thanks for listening to the Fast Lane on VTRN Sports, 93.3 FM, W227 BG Timberlake, and 1320 AM, WVGM Lynchburg.
This is Sports Center.
I'm Christine Lisi. No Jaden Daniels for the Commanders. Monday night against the Chiefs. Washington's franchise quarterback out with a hamstring injury. He missed 2 games earlier this season with a sprained knee. ESPN NFL analyst Dan Orlovsky.
Second time this year he's going to miss time because of an injury. Mm-hmm. Is it going to impact the way that they call plays? Is it going to impact the way that he plays stylistically? And can they have the season that they kind of expected coming into this year too? So I'm hoping he's going to be healthy as soon as possible, but I do believe it's going to have a butterfly effect of how he plays.
Marcus Mariota will start in place of Daniels again this week. Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson returned to practice after missing the last 2 games with a hamstring injury. 1-5 Baltimore outscored 61-13 in the 2 games that he missed. NBA, big boost for the Magic for tonight's season opener. Point guard Jalen Suggs returns from an arthroscopic knee procedure at home versus Miami. The Giants hired Tennessee baseball coach Tony Vitello as their new manager. First time a Major League Baseball team's hired a manager directly from a college program without any experience as a pro coach. San Francisco's paying his $3 million buyout at Tennessee.
ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Keep your career moving forward with growth opportunities, great pay and benefits, and one of the country's top workplaces. Go to careers.progressive.com and apply today.
From Studio 2 at the worldwide headquarters of ESPN.
That's us.
And the HD studio in Atlanta, Georgia.
With you.
This is Freddie and Harry.
Derek in Virginia, who has to win game 5 more, the Knicks versus Indiana or the Timberwolves versus Denver, and why?
I think what happens is that big overpaid scarecrow, Mr. Coronavirus, Rudy Gobert needs to start showing up because you can't be the defensive player of the year and then all of a sudden look like you just trying to scare away the clothes from the car.
Pull over, Derek. Derek, pull over. Derek, pull over. You can't. You got to get out the ambulance way. Pull over.
Bag up, Terry. Put it in reverse, Terry.
What you doing, Terry?
Good morning. With your three-pronged TrostLaw.com fast take on Rewind 1039 Lynchburg's classic hits, I'm Ed Lane. Angle 1. The Rustburg Red Devils, unable to field a roster and therefore canceling their game at Jefferson Forest this coming Friday. From a Rustburg perspective, you just hated that they're in this particular situation. And the point where they don't believe they can field enough players to have a healthy game against Jefferson Forest. From JF's perspective, it's unfortunate because it's another chance their players could have gone out and just played a football game. Yes, they would have probably won fairly convincingly, but JF as a program generally does not run the score up on other teams. When they're in blowout games in the second half, they do everything they can to just get the game over with as soon as possible. But the most unfortunate part is this might be a trend going forward where when things go south, it really goes south and other schools can't play late season games. And that you don't want to see. With your TrostLaw.com Fast 8 on Rewind 1039 Lynchburg's Classic Hits, I'm Ed Lane. Join us for the Fast Lane, 5 to 6 p.m., VTR and Sports app, 93.3 FM. We got three truths colliding at Rustburg High School for this TrostLaw.com Fast Take. Rustburg's players not being able to play this Friday against JF is a missed chance for the ones that are still around, but understandable because they don't want injuries. Jefferson Forest, disappointment because you only get so many home football games, and Jefferson Forest historically has not run the score up on teams. But most disappointing of all is you hope this doesn't become a trend across all of athletics. When things don't go well, games don't get played. Wednesday in the Fast Lane, Cal superfan and former Raiders CEO Amy Trask joined us to chime in on Cal at Virginia Tech. 5:30 p.m. Friday, VTRN Sports. Plus, the latest in the NFL and, yes, her impressions of what's happening in Chapel Hill. Hear it all, Fastlane Ed Lane, where you listen to podcasts. Connect, Fastlane Ed Lane, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and join us Thursday, NASCAR Martinsville preview with Steve Post of the Motor Racing Network. The Fastlane, 5 to 6 p.m., VTRN Sports app, 93.3 FM.
Wednesday in the Fast Lane, we discussed the three-pronged storyline of Rustburg at Jefferson Forest being canceled on the high school football field this Friday. The Rustburg angle, the JF angle, and what we hope isn't a precursor for future situations. Plus, Bob Alvis of the Sports Buffet podcast weighed in on the Thomas versus VHSL situation at Brookville. Hear it all, Fastlane Edley, where you listen to podcasts. Connect Fastlane Edley, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and join us Thursday in the Fastlane, 5 to 6 p.m., VTRN Sports app, 93.3 FM. Including Facebook Live and YouTube. If you missed anything, thanks for listening. He's in a on the Fast Lane, but that shorter show Friday because of
It's so worth it.
Evaluate situations with me.
Radio Network.
It's so worth
The closer
experience, Andy Matthews is your
period. Subscribe today at TechSideline.com.
Have a good night. Mark Dalton here with Terry Volkswagen. Get ready.
pain of your
Suddenly rains.
so delicious. They totally
ESPN.
Up for Jordan Love.
But I'm going to.
Mark Dalton here with
Road right through Low for 50 years. Nation's longest standing run.
yummy.
Sports powered by ESPN Radio, VTRN Sports.
Somebody to play your favorite music while. Classic hits from the app.